What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, probably one of the most anticipated albums of the year, as this is the first one in 34 years for this band. I'm going over the latest offering from Dark Angel, Extinction Level Event. This came out on September 5th on Reversed Records, and this is the band's fourth or fifth studio full-length overall. It depends on if you count We Have Arrived as a full album or if you consider it a demo. It really varies from person to person. To me, this is their fourth album. I think Darkness Descends is the real first album of Dark Angel, but that's beside the point. But yeah, this is the first album in 34 years from these LA thrash legends. Actually, one of my favorite 80s thrash bands, especially for Darkness Descends. Like, that album is a masterpiece of thrash that almost gets into death metal with how fast and heavy it got. Even for 1986 standards, it was groundbreaking. Of course, Gene Hoglan on drums. I will never complain about his drumming. He is arguably the greatest metal drummer of all time. It's definitely between he and Dave Lombardo for sure, but yeah, I guess after he left Testament a couple of years ago, he wanted to try and get Dark Angel back up and running, which, granted, the band had been back together on and off for about a decade at this point, and there was always rumblings we would be getting a new album, and here we are in 2025, we finally get a new album. So what were the results? Well, I'll be honest with you, I avoided the singles as they dropped because I had heard from so many people that they were not good. And, well, needless to say, I think most people would be correct in that assessment. And especially as I listen to this album, I'm thinking to myself, this is what we get. This is what we're getting here. Are we sure about this, guys? Now, look, it isn't all bad, because I will admit Gene puts on a great performance, drum-wise, of course, because he's Gene fucking Hoglan, puts on a great performance in terms of the drumming on here. And I will admit there are some really cool riffs that show up here. It definitely gets thrashy at times, but honestly, for the most part, this album kind of felt like a bland, stock groove metal album. Like, there's more mid-tempo songs on here than there are fast songs. But we kick things off with the title track, which was the first single dropped for the album, and, well, I mean, musically, it's pretty solid. Like, you get tremolo riffs, it's very thrashy, it's heavy as hell, solid riff work, triplet chugs, kind of remind me of the old Dark Angel, like Darkness Descends era. However, two major problems immediately as I heard this song. What in the hell happened to the mix on the drums? The drums sound terrible on this album, like, especially down to the snare. Like, there are times where the snare just gets completely buried under the guitars and everything else. And the second big problem, Ron Reinhardt's vocals. Now, I have the other two Dark Angel albums, Leave Scars and Time Does Not Heal. He wasn't bad, but I'll be honest with you, when it came to Dark Angel vocals, I preferred Don Dottie on Darkness Descends. Like, he has a more maniacal vocal delivery that I can get behind, whereas Ron here, I just was never a big Ron Reinhardt guy. Musically, Leave Scars and Time Does Not Heal is awesome, but vocally, big step down from Don Dottie, at least in my personal opinion, and I don't know what kind of delivery he was going for. He was kind of trying to sound like a tough guy, hardcore vocalist at times, and it just did not fit on this album whatsoever. I don't know what in the world happened here. Like, just, I have a lot of questions about this whole entire album, if I'm going to be honest. But, I mean, like I said, the opening title track musically wasn't bad. It was actually a pretty solid tune. And then Circular Firing Squad, you get riffs that remind me more of Testament and Slayer than anything else. But this was really where the drum production annoyed the hell out of me. Again, the snare gets buried. I hate when it happens, especially when it's Gene Hoglan. And there's weird vocal effects. Like, there are weird vocal effects across the board on this album to try and make Ron sound better-ish. And it just honestly makes his vocals feel even more exposed than they do already, even without the effects. And then, of course, this is really where kind of the groove metal aspects started to get in. Like, Woke Up the Blood is, for the most part, like, I mean, granted, it's one of the better tracks on here. Builds up with a nice chug and drum build, and it chugs and grooves like Slayer. And it gallops and does get thrashy. Hell, there's even blast beats. But the more we go through this album, the more of that, like, groove metal aspect starts coming in. As far as songs that do get thrashy after the first three, Apex Predator, I think, is hands down the best track on the album musically. It's faster with the drumming and the riffing. It feels like, again, proper Dark Angel. Even that song I have problems with, and again, it's down to the biggest issues of the vocals and the production. But as far as the other fast songs, like Atavistic, I mean, that's a thrashy, furious song. It's pretty decent. And then the closer, Extraction Tactics, you get some thrashier parts coming in there, as well as some cool tribal drums that don't sound terrible in the mix. But the rest of this album, like Sea of Hands, that song feels like a stock, bland, generic groove metal song. Like, it's lacking in everything that I was hoping and expecting to hear from a return album from Dark Angel. And then Scalar, whatever, Weaponry. There are some cooler riffs on there, like there's some Testament riffs that show up on there, but again, the song itself feels like a Testament B-side. Like, honestly, I think Testament could take that song and make it better, in my personal opinion. And then, probably the two songs that I had the biggest problem with would be El Pluribus Nemo and Terror Construct. Like, especially Terror Construct. It's the longest track of the album, and it's just nothing but bland groove metal again. Like, that song went way too long for what it was going for, and it just was not interesting at all. None whatsoever. And then back to E Pluribus Nemo, there's just these weird, like, twangy guitars. Granted, you do get darker melodies and a bass groove, but even that's not enough to save this track. And then even a song like Scarface the Room, yeah, you get more machine gun riffs, but it's not really in a thrash sense. It's more like a speed metal vibe, which nothing wrong with that. And there are darker riffs, but the song itself still is just an average song, honestly, when it comes down to this album. Yeah, like I said, I have a lot of questions about this album after listening to it, thinking, what in the hell happened to Dark Angel? You know, like, 34 years after your last album, and this is what we get? I don't know. It's this whole album, to describe it, as I don't know. I don't know what happened. The songwriting, for the most part, felt stock, aside from a couple of tracks, mainly the title track and Apex Predator. Musically, at least, those songs are solid, but the production's bad, the vocals are bad, and I don't know. Lead work-wise, you do get solid leads. Like, I believe her name's Laura Christine, Gene Hoglan's wife. If she's doing the lead, she's putting on a hell of a performance. Like, she's doing everything she can to make this album sound better than it does. But even she couldn't save this album, in my mind. So, yeah, this is probably going to go down as one of the most disappointing and arguably one of the worst comeback albums in metal history. I'm only going to give it a 1.5 out of 5. I don't know. This album, to me, just did nothing for me. It just felt bland. It was boring. And The production was bad. The vocals are terrible. Really, it's just... part of me wishes this album could have been just like delayed until they got the production right and got a vocalist who can actually do the vocals justice and rework these songs to give it that extra bite and give it some energy, because there's not much in terms of energy and bite on here. This album is just, what the hell happened? Luckily, it's not the worst thing I've heard this year. This is certainly better than Sleep Token, but even that ain't really saying much, because I gave that album a 1 star. This is only a half a star better than that, and that's mostly down to a couple of songs actually being pretty decent. But yeah, this album, I feel like this should be erased from the minds of everybody personally, or if it has to exist, scrap it and rework the songs and get the production better and get a better vocalist. But it's too late for that. It's here in our ears now. So yeah, I hated to have to give a negative review for something I was looking forward to in terms of thrash, but yeah. But anyways, of course, this is just my opinion. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.